Section 3.2, dividing polynomials. First, let's just talk about the basics of division. The number inside our little division house is the dividend. Outside, that's called the divisor. And then the answer is the quotient. You also have the leftover, which is called the remainder. The dividend, if it's a fraction that you're starting with, since fractions are just division, the dividend is the numerator. The divisor is the denominator. Also, if it's written in a sentence, the divisor is the thing that it says divided by this. And then quotient is just the answer. For this example, we have 8x to the fourth plus 6x squared minus 3x plus 1 divided by 2x squared minus x plus 2. So the first part goes inside our division house. Notice that there's not an x to the third, so we need to make sure that we include a placeholder, 0x to the third, plus 6x squared minus 3x plus 1 divided by 2x squared minus x plus 2. So the first thing you do is you look at the leading coefficients. So the 8 and 2, 8 divided by 2 is 4. Also do the x's. X to the fourth divided by x squared would be x squared. Then you multiply back. You actually distribute to the divisor. Four x squared times 2x squared is 8x to the fourth. Those should always match our first thing. 4x squared times negative x would be negative 4x to the third. That's why we had our placeholder to make room for the x to the third. And 4x squared times 2 is 8x squared. And then you need to subtract. So change all of these signs. And we'll bring down also after that. Eight x to the fourth minus 8x to the fourth is 0. 0x cubed plus 4x cubed is 4x cubed. 6x squared minus 8x squared. It's negative 2x squared. And you can bring down the other minus 3x plus 1. Now we're again going to start over. Look at the leading coefficients. 4 divided by 2 is 2. It's positive. Multiply back, distribute back to the divisor. 4x squared. X to the third divided by x squared. We need our x there. So that's 4x cubed. Again, notice these need to be the exact same. 2x times negative x, negative 2x squared. 2x times 2 plus 4x. Subtract, so change all the signs. Cancels out. cancels out. Negative 3x minus 4x is negative 7x. Bring down the 1. Again, we're going to look at the leading coefficients, but this time pay particular close attention. We only have negative 7x, and we have a 2x squared. Can't divide x by x squared, so this is our remainder. And you can actually write this all as one polynomial. So you can say it equals 4x squared plus 2x plus negative 7x plus 1, but that's our remainder, so it needs to be over, as a fraction, what we divided by. There is a little bit of a shortcut because long division is long, and it's called synthetic division. It is a little bit shorter, it's a little bit easier, but the key to it is that it only works with a linear divisor, which means it only works when you're dividing by a linear expression, which can only have an x. So if it has an x squared or an x cubed or anything like that in the divisor, you cannot do synthetic division. So in order to do synthetic division, you first have to flip the division house upside down. So it would look like that. Then on the inside, you would write the coefficients of the dividend, just the coefficients, and if there was a 0x cubed like there was in the previous example, you would need to put a 0. For the outside, you're going to set the divisor equal to 0 and solve it. The answer to that equation is what goes on the outside here. And once it's set up, synthetic division is pretty easy. All you need to do is add and multiply. You add straight down, you multiply diagonally. So this time we're going to use synthetic division to do 3x to the 5th plus 5x to the 4th minus 4x cubed plus 7x plus 3 divided by x plus 2. So let's go ahead and write our upside down division. Now we're dividing by x plus 2, so set that equal to 0, solve. So we get x equals negative 2. So negative 2 is the number on the outside. Then on the inside, we just write the coefficients. So 3x to the 5th, so that goes first. 5x to the 4th, so we can put 5. Negative 4x to the 3rd, so negative 4. Now notice there's no x squared, so we need to include a 0 x squared. Then we can go to the 7 for 7x, and 3 as our constant. And as we wrote on the previous page, the first step is add. And you add straight down. So we're going to start with this 3. We're not adding anything to it, so we would really just bring it down. Then you multiply diagonally. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And your answer goes diagonally as well. Add 5 and negative 6 is negative 1. Multiply diagonally again. Negative times negative is positive. Add straight down. Negative 2. Multiply by diagonally again. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Add straight down. 4. Multiply by diagonally. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Add straight down. Negative 1. Multiply diagonally. Positive 2. Finally, add straight down. 3 plus 2 is 5. Now the last number is your remainder. And then it just counts up from there. So the first number to the left of the remainder is our constant. And then the 4, the next number to the left is the coefficient of x. Then the coefficient of x squared, coefficient of x to the third, and this last one then is the coefficient of x to the fourth. So to write that as a polynomial, our answer would be 3x to the fourth minus 1x to the third minus 2x squared plus 4x minus 1. And then 5 is our remainder, so we could write plus 5 over what we divided by, x plus 2. So let's look at that previous example from a different perspective real quick. This is the same polynomial from that last example, and the negative 2 is what we did synthetic division by. But now let's look at it as a function, a polynomial function that we're going to evaluate for negative 2. So 3 times negative 2 to the 5th plus 5 times negative 2 to the 4th minus 4 times negative 2 to the 3rd plus 7 times negative 2 plus 3. Two to the 5th is 32. Since it's negative, it'll be negative 32. Multiplied by 3, we get negative 96. 2 to the 4th is 16, so that's going to be 16 times 5, which is 80. 2 to the 3rd is 8, so that'll be negative 8 times negative 4, so positive 32. 7 times negative 2 is negative 14, plus 3. Add all of that up, and you get 5. Now, if you remember, 5 was actually the remainder. And there's actually a theorem about this, and it's not very creative, but it's called the remainder theorem. And basically all that it states is when you divide, the remainder is the output. The remainder is the output. But you do need to remember that when we're talking about the output, it's the output for when you solve what we're actually dividing by. So if we're dividing by x plus 2, it's the output for negative 2. It's the output for the thing that we are doing our synthetic division with. So a corollary to that would be if x minus c divides with no remainder, then x minus c is a factor. And if you think about that, if it divides with no remainder, the remainder will be 0. So the output would be 0, which means it's on the x-axis, which means it's a 0 or a root or a solution, and therefore it's also a factor.